everyone, welcome to another episode of Rehab Garage. This video is basically covering the last month of work that I've been doing in the garage, and as you can see I finally got the SR20 back from the mechanics after getting a forged rebuild. So just before I started the camera I put a new rear main seal in, and now you can see I'm starting to put the clutch back in after putting the flywheel on. Use some brand new ARP bolts for the flywheel, and obviously I'm using all the hardware that the clutch and flywheel was balanced with when the machine shop balanced all the bottom end. I've sped up all this footage of me working just because obviously it'll be quite a very long and boring video over all the weekends that I've worked on this. Also the 2 weekends I shot this video, I used 2 different SD cards, but both of them the audio didn't work out on, so I don't have any really good audio, which is another good reason to speed up all the clips. Got the torque wrench out here doing up the clutch pressure plate bolts to the specified torque, just trying to get everything spot on as I can. For those of you playing at home, every time you see the red ball when Bert drops it off for me to throw, you should have a shot of alcohol of some, or whatever drink you like. The drivetrain that I've ended up going with is a twin plate SR20 clutch and flywheel combo, and then the gearbox is actually an RB25 manual out of a R33 GTST. I bought actually the clutch and gearbox and adapter plate all as a package to go on this engine. I knew the SR20 gearboxes weren't so reliable, and I just pretty much didn't want to put something unreliable in there, so the RB25 manual gearbox is a great step up if you want to go sort of OEM plus. As you're about to see, I had a couple of challenges when I was putting in the gearbox. The very first was getting the clutch alignment tool out. It was just a plastic one that came with a CD clutch. Eventually got it out and managed to get the gearbox lined up the first time, only to discover that I'd forgotten to trim one of the dowels on the gearbox. So a bit of short work with the angle grinder to cut that off. Then I ended up pulling the gearbox out to clean any metal particles or flakes or any debris that went in when I did that, and then had trouble getting the gearbox back on again. So ended up spending 2 days altogether to get it to the point where the gearbox is actually on the motor, mounted, all lined up and turning over nicely. Two weekends later, I started shooting again. Of course, I had a weekend in between where I did a bit of work, as I'm about to show you on film now. I was, talking at the time, but the audio on this clip unfortunately did not work out. But I managed to do quite a bit of work in the in-between weekend. I did things like putting the blow-by hose on. I mocked up the turbo manifold, just fun really. But I got all the intake on. Again, all the blow-by hoses there. Fuel rails, things like that. But I still got a bit of work to do on all the hoses underneath the plenum. I replaced the IACV valve and the VCT solenoid because I am running an S14 SR20 and I'm retaining the VCT with my Haltech. I installed an LS1 alternator and brackets and basically painted all of the pulleys and brackets that you see on the front of the motor there. Now I'm removing some hoses and brackets that I had fitted last weekend because I forgot to install the knock sensor, and I also decided to buy a couple of hoses to replace and simplify the water lines that run underneath the intake manifold. There's quite a bit of stuff that I have to take off and get out of the way. Still working away on the brackets there. Even in the sped up footage it takes quite a while to get them all off and things like that. Here I'm undoing the rear bracket that has the water hoses on them attached to them as well. Just trying to work out how to get an angle of attack to get that knock sensor put in. Decided obviously there to pull off one of the water hoses, deciding that'll make my life a little bit easier, plus a little bit of light, of course, it always helps. And I eventually managed to get the knock sensor started and obviously torqued down to spec with the torque wrench. Some hoses I've been able to reuse, like this one. Other ones where I've had to replace them, I've been trying to get OEM parts where I can, as you can see there. The hoses that I'm putting on, well, this one's a replacement one obviously. Just before that, one of the hoses to remove the throttle body out of the water path and simplify all the water lines that run under the intake. It just feels like it'd be really, really hard to get to them once the motor is in the vehicle. I started putting the brackets back on there. Now I'm adding fresh grub screw clamps to replace the OEM spring type clamps. Just the OEM ones are a little bit tired, and again I want to make sure that this stuff under the intake manifold doesn't leak and doesn't cause me any problems. While I've got access to all of this sort of stuff, I decide that it's probably going to be a good idea to fit all of the hoses right now. So as you can see, I'm fitting the dash 10AN lines to the Tomei oil filter block because I'm going to be running an external oil filter. So there's the to and from oil lines that I'm going to have to deal with. I just pulled the alternator back off a little bit to give myself really good access so I can get a wrench in there to do up the AN lines, as you can see right there. I'm really glad that I did do this before I have put this power plant into the car. I had to remove the oil pressure sensor switch here just to get enough room to do up the AN line. So there it is coming off. To get enough room to do up that AN line. So yeah, I'm so glad that I did that while it's out of the car. Having to undo a little bit of work to move forward, but nothing too bad. And I should probably mention, when I'm working in my garage, it's something that I do to de-stress from my normal day-to-day job. I've said before in videos that probably out of a whole fortnight I maybe spend 3 days working in my shed and working on this sort of stuff. Just started putting bracketry back on the back in the video there. So my builds don't go at any extremely quick pace whatsoever. I build at my own speed. I do things at my own speed when I'm in the garage. And occasionally I throw a video camera on and record what I'm doing, so that's always a bonus. With the intake side sorted out, I decided to spend some time working on the exhaust side, or the hot side. I guess the theme for today is basically pipe work. With the intake pipes and and whatnot. So getting it into a nice position there on the floor for me to work on it. It's a pity the audio didn't work on that clip, because I'm sure I was saying something really, really witty right then. But anyway, I picked up the camera to show you guys that I've been working on the intercooler piping as well. In the meantime, I added a little section in there just so that pipe fitted the existing hole in the car a little bit better than the Just Jap Racing standard pipe did. It's easy to modify when you know how to, weld and can do these things yourself. So why not? That's got a plug in the water for it. Pressure. Plug. I need to. So here I've obviously pulled off the turbo manifold to work on it on the bench. I went to install the wastegate just to mock some things up earlier and had a few problems, so I decided to have a go at it on my bench, and it's like, well, may as well put all the fittings into it the way that I need to have them facing before I, install it as a mock-up. I'm really glad that I did put it on the bench and install all of this sort of stuff before, as a test run before putting it in the car. I found out that getting the Turbo Smart wastegate installed onto this manifold was quite difficult with the valve seat, and also getting the V-band clamp on, getting the nut started so I could clamp the V-band clamp down and hold the wastegate in position. As you're about to see, I ended up resorting to using zip ties to hold the V-band clamp in place enough to get that nut started and get it clamping down. But I'm really glad I did, because I got it done. So while I've been waiting for the motor to come back, I heat covered all the AN lines I got. This is a Mumba Turbo line kit for an SR20, GT28 RS Turbo. It was quite cheap buying it as a kit off eBay, and then adding the heat sleeve, but it pretty much gave me all the fittings, bar the one that I'm touching there I'm going to replace with a M14 to AN fitting, just so it comes straight out of there. It's going to allow me a bit better of a run for that water line to the turbocharger. But I thought I'd put them all on there and test fit up these bits. Just to see where I'm going to route them. It's a lot easier to do this sort of mock-up outside of the car and try and work it out. You can have a bit of a guess with this sort of stuff. I've got the car sitting a metre away that I can use a measuring tape and get some ideas of how much space that I've got, based on where the engine mount is on either side of the car, to know what space I've got to work with these lines and whatnot. This whole turbocharger exhaust and wastegate setup is quite a tight package. Luckily it's all V-band, so I can put the exhaust housing on and start tightening up that V-band clamp before putting the rest of the supercore package together on the motor, which is a really good thing, because I have a few things that I need to miss. The dipstick is one of them, the wastegate is the other one, and yeah, having that V-band allows me to rotate it quite easily. Speaking of rotation, I need to rotate the centre section of the core. The documentation that I got with my turbo tells me that I need to rotate it in a clockwise direction. So I need to undo the 6 bolts around it that hold the clamps on, to keep it in place on the compressor side there. Apologies for the camera angle, I just kind of threw the GoPro down and hit record while I was doing this. So yeah, as you can see there, I have to throw the supercore in and then rotate both the exhaust and the compressor housings down until it's in the place that I need it to be. Once it's in there, I can flick the V-band clamps on and start, there you go, tightening up the exhaust housing V-band clamp, and then the center section of the turbo also has a V-band clamp for the rotation, so you can rotate it in place on the engine there to get it sitting in the right spot. This one only just clears the dipstick, so I've only got a small window where I can have it faced and not have too much angle, so the exhaust is facing straight into the head, but enough space to get an intake onto the front of the turbo there. As you can see here, the shots to get the water lines and the oil line to the turbo, I've got quite a lot of room around the top mount exhaust manifold there. They do fit quite nicely. I am going to change that one that's up off the water neck just so it comes around on the same side of these other water and oil lines, and all sort of curl over the top of the center core of the turbo. I'll be able to all attach them together and to keep them nicely routed. But that's about it for this episode. In the next one, as long as I can replace the mounts on the car with new ones, I might end up dropping the motor into the car, which will be quite exciting. See ya!